This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest a nice young man named Bedsole, who is running for Attorney General of Alabama, and he's a practicing lawyer in Birmingham, long roots in the state of Alabama, and he's one of the prominent leading candidates for Attorney General in this year's crowded election for all of our statewide offices, folks. We've got an open governor's race, open lieutenant governor's race, and an open Attorney General's race, and about 5 other things. So it's going to be a long ballot, but I wanted y'all to meet Mr. Bedsole tonight. Chess, good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
You know, Chess, his experience in politics has been, he was leading the Trump campaign in the state. He and Jim Carnes in Birmingham, my old legislative buddy. How'd you get involved in the Trump campaign?
Well, it actually was because of Jeff Sessions.
You and Jeff are good friends?
Yeah, we are. I've known him my whole life. We attended the same traditional Methodist church down in Mobile. And so basically, I was talking to Senator Sessions and trying to get some help. I had a criminal court up in Blount County. We were trying to get some kind of federal aid and some more resources.
That's how you know Dennis Beavers.
That's how I know Dennis Beavers. Yes. Yeah, he actually lives in the jurisdiction, so we all talked about this.
Tell him you're on my show now when you and Jenna go back.
I'll definitely do that. Well, basically, Blount County's kind of in the middle of the meth problem. And so
I didn't know that, right in the middle.
Yeah, and so basically that whole area in North Alabama, and now you got opioids coming in too. But we had a problem in our jurisdiction, and the problem was that we had been successful enough so that the dealers had moved out of the jurisdictional lines. And so we're looking for some way to get some resources in to arrest these people and get them under justice and having them quit sell this stuff. And so one of the folks I talked to about that was Senator Sessions. And he said, hey, in the course of this conversation, he said, hey, I think that you should meet more people, because if you knew more people in this state, you could fix some of these problems a little easier. And I said, well, great, you know, I would do anything you told me to do. And he said, okay, I'll call you back. So he called back a couple weeks later, and he said, I've got a way for you to meet more folks, and it's to get on a campaign. Would you work a campaign if somebody called you and asked you to? And I said, you know, if you're telling me to do it, then yes. And he said, well, I am. And I said, well, then I'll say yes. And I didn't ask who, and he didn't say. And about 2 weeks later, the Trump campaign called. And they said, you know, we understand from Senator Sessions that you're the guy we need to talk to. And Sessions had told them that I was older, that I was a lawyer. I'm actually 46. I don't look it, but he said, you know, you need somebody with white hair and a law degree. And so basically, I wound up going up to New York, met with Mr. Trump on a Saturday morning. And he comes down in the elevator. We were on the 5th floor, and of course, he's up at the top where he lives. He comes down in the elevator, and he's wearing jeans and a long-sleeve polo knit shirt, but he's casual. And he hung out for about an hour. He was hilarious. He made jokes about his weight, about his lack of working out, and we all started laughing, and he made us feel at ease. And then he made a joke about his hair, and nobody laughed except him. And he said, you know what, I love making jokes about my hair because nobody ever has the nerve to laugh.
Is that what he said?
That's what he said. And so we were off and running, and but I flew home, and I was back in Birmingham Sunday morning, and it was the first real big interview that he had, and it was on the Sunday morning news show. And it was this lady in New York who's with the ABC affiliate, and she asked him straight out of the chute, she wanted to ask him a regular guy kind of question, you know, like they'll ask how much does milk cost. So she says, well, you know, Mr. Trump, when was the last time you put on a pair of jeans? And I was sitting there with my wife, and I said, oh, great, it was yesterday, and we took pictures. We can prove it. And I thought that's the way it would go. And he said, you know, I don't think that has anything to do with being a good president. And she said, well, you know, Americans wear jeans, and they want to know that they're electing somebody that's relatable. And I just wonder if you own a pair of jeans, or when was the last time you put them on? And he said, no, Americans want somebody who'll fix the economy and provide jobs and secure the border. And he starts going on, and she stops him. Long story short, they get in a fight for 10 minutes over jeans. It's the entire interview time was wasted on jeans. And the minute it was over, I called the campaign manager. It had been taped about 2 hours before it aired. He was already back home. And he said, Chess, he said, I'm trying to get used to it, but in the car on the way out, I asked him, I said, now, Mr. Trump, do you think that was a good interview? And he said, oh, yeah, Corey, I thought it was a great interview. And he said, now, explain to me, make me understand how your mind works. How do you think that that was a good interview? And he laughed and he said, Corey, I've been dealing with these New York media types long before you were born. I've known them my whole life. They're all the same. Let me tell you something. If you wind them up on 10 minutes talking about blue jeans, they will never have a chance to ask you about your tax returns.
So he knew what he was doing.
So he knew what he was doing. And but that was my first kind of weekend experience with him. And then after that, it went. And of course, it was crazy, but it was great. And I ran Alabama until we voted on March the 1st of 2016. And then after that, they made me a senior advisor, put me on New York payroll, and they sent me to 16 different states. They had me flying with Mike Pence as the Trump advisor to Pence for several weeks. And then they put me in Florida where I ran legal. And we filed in all 67 Florida counties 3 times, and we litigated in 7 of them, won all of them. So
it was a great experience, wasn't it?
It was. It was a great time. Loved it.
Chess, did you got to know Mike Pence? People like him a lot.
I love Mike Pence. He's a great guy. He's solid. He's grounded. He's a normal guy. And I love his family. His family travels with him a lot. He's got a son and 2 daughters, and his wife too. Just all of them are just such nice people. And he's just he's one of these rare guys that gets to that level of play, but he's just totally normal.
Everybody who ever served in Congress with him talks really good about him. They really got to be, I think Joe Bonner got to be pretty good friends with him. I think Adderholt's good friends with him.
Well, Gary Palmer knows
That's
him
right,
well
Palmer,
too.
Yeah.
I think he's well known in a lot of places.
They served with him, especially Bonner.
Yeah.
And somebody else in delegation, I forgot who it was real good friends with him. But people like Pence a lot, like Trump too. But anyway, Chess, going back to old Jeff Sessions, so y'all were in the same Methodist church together. He was like you. He was a devout Methodist.
Yeah.
Always, he was even went to Huntington because of that.
That's right.
Out here in Montgomery, and you went to Emory.
That's right. We both attended Methodist
school.
colleges. Yeah.
Did you ever know my fraternity brother Watson, that was Mike Watson?
I did. Mike was at our church for a while down in Mobile, and now he's at mine and Jenna's church in Birmingham.
Tell Mike hello for me.
I'll do that. He's a good guy.
He likes it, but we were all Sigma News at Alabama together.
Okay.
Mike was, and Margaret was a KD, and we were all good friends. And but Mike was the nicest. He was already. He knew he was going to be a minister.
Yeah.
When he was he was the only one of us that acted right in college.
He was definitely called for that job.
He was.
Yeah.
So he goes to y'all's church.
Yeah, he's up in Birmingham now.
What church is y'all? He was in Atlanta.
Canterbury Methodist.
He was like on Homewood on the main street there. Canterbury Methodist is right next to Dawson.
No. You're thinking of Trinity.
Okay.
Canterbury's further down the same road.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of, I think they're about a mile and a half apart.
Mike and Margaret were in Atlanta. He was
Yes.
like the elder. What was his position in the Methodist church?
He was the regional bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
So he's
just a great
retired
guy.
now and goes to y'all's church, Canterbury.
He's semi-retired, and so they gave him kind of a whatever role he wanted is what he got. And we all love him, and he's just a great guy. But he was down in Mobile for years, and then he was over in Atlanta on the regional level. And then when he came back and hit semi-retirement, he came to Birmingham because his daughters are there.
Yeah, that's the reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chess. Now, so you grew up in Mobile then?
I grew up in Jackson, Alabama.
Yeah, right there by Mobile. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where all the Bedsole. That's where Ann's from originally. How you and Ann kin to each other?
All right.
Palmer. She married Palmer Bedsole, who's kin to you.
That's right. Palmer's my relative. My grandfather and Palmer were first cousins.
And they're in Jackson.
Yeah, that's right.
Now Jackson's in not Clark County.
County.
Clark County, yeah.
And Mom's family's up there too. So I just was surrounded by family growing up.
I'm in that Clark County paper.
Oh, yeah,
Jim
sure
Cox paper.
Yeah,
over
Jim
there.
Cox's paper.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And old Mike Breedlove served me in the legislature.
That's right.
And he has the Jackson paper there. He runs me in the Jackson paper
Yep.
too.
And Mike and Linda were also at the Methodist Church in Jackson too, so I knew them from there too.
So you know Mike and
Yeah, I know Mike and Linda. I like them a lot.
Good. Chess, now you grew up in Mobile and then went over to Emory to school. Did you
I did.
finish high school at UMS or something?
No,
Where'd you-
I went up to high school in Chattanooga.
Chattanooga.
Yeah.
But now,
You know, I grew up when all these schools were going co-ed for the first time. And so UMS was going co-ed in the 80s. And so the reality of that was when you put 500 girls on a campus, you don't have the building space. So the boys would wind up in trailers.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's the way it worked. And so my grandfather said, you know, I'm not interested in you sitting in a trailer for 4 years while they build a building. So that was what happened.
Emory's doggone good school though.
It is. I enjoyed it.
Had to be smart to get in there. Hey, what about?
Got to work hard.
Yeah. Chess, but then you went to Alabama Law School.
Yes.
Now, did you and Gina meet in law school?
We
Which
did.
y'all meet?
I saw Jenna, and she's sitting to the side.
I wish y'all could see her picture.
Me
she's
too.
She's a pretty girl.
Yes, she is.
Mhm.
I saw Jenna across the room first day of Alabama Law School.
First day, y'all were the
First
same
day.
class.
Yep, same section.
Has
And
Gina practiced law any?
she does. She's actually a very accomplished attorney. She's with Baker Donaldson in
Oh, okay,
Birmingham.
Baker Donaldson. Huh?
Yeah, she's the head of their labor and employment practice.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So you
No,
and
it's okay.
Jenna, you saw her first day in law school.
I saw her first day, and I
I guess
immediately asked somebody.
she's the prettiest freshman in the class.
She was to me.
Uh-huh.
And so I asked somebody, who that is, and they said, well, Chess, she's got a boyfriend. And I said, well, she used to, but now she's in law school, and she'll never see that guy again.
Was he in undergraduate school with Alabama?
He was a second year, and he was about to give her an orientation lecture, and so everybody told me, you got to keep it quiet, don't say anything. So I waited that out, and when I grew up a little bit too, then I asked her out, and we started dating and got married pretty
Y'all
quick.
got married after law school?
We did.
And she's with Baker Donaldson.
She is.
And does employment law? Or, hey, Chess, now y'all got 2 daughters.
We do, 7 and 11.
Where are they in school?
They're downtown Birmingham. Jenna's office is a block away from them. My office is 2 blocks away from them, and they're at a Christian school in between us. So it works out real well. It's nice and
What
cozy.
grades that put them in?
Well, let's see. One of them is entering the 2nd grade, and the other one is entering the 6th grade.
I got a little granddaughter there in Vestavia, my only granddaughter. My older daughter's a lawyer with Carr Allison's defense firm. She lives in Vestavia and practices in Vestavia. And my only granddaughter's named Kate. She started her 1st grade class yesterday, and you don't believe what she calls me. When y'all get to be grandparents, you can't control what they call you. You will never guess. My name is Geese.
Why?
I don't know. I never understand that. I said, Jenny, what is she calling me when she started talking? We were swimming there. She said, Dad, she calls you Geese just as clear as a bell. So they'll give you the name they want you to have, so you can't control that. So Gina may want to have a certain name, but they're going to give her what name they want. I'm Geese. I never heard that before. Have you?
No, that's a new one on me.
Chess, tell me about, so did you get interested in running for Attorney General because Sessions was Attorney General, what made you want to leave your private law practice run for Attorney General?
A couple of things. But you mentioned Sessions. I'll hit that first.
Yeah.
I'm actually the same age he was when he ran.
Which is good to be starting that young.
It is.
He was 46 when he ran for Attorney General?
46 or 7. I'll be 47 before Election Day, so I didn't do the math on the exact year, but about the same age. And so, the interesting part was when he ran, the office had been through turmoil.
Who was there for him? It was kind of a
Jimmy Evans.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
And so it'd been a rough time. You had the Guy Hunt issue, and of course Hunt was removed, and Jimmy Evans had done that, and so it was just a tough time in state history. And then on top of that, the budgets had just decimated the office. There wasn't any money left in it, and so he spent the first year or 2 just kind of fixing the office. And
probably some partisanship in that.
A lot.
See, it was still Democratic-controlled legislature.
A lot.
And they were gutting his budget.
Yeah.
Is what they were doing.
They were.
I've got pictures all over my wall, me and Jeff Sessions.
He's a good guy.
My first year in the legislature, I passed the Victims of Crime and Leniencies courtroom bill. Miss Miriam Sheehan was head of vocal.
Yeah.
And her daughter had been murdered at Birmingham Southern. If you remember, you're too young to remember that, but it was a traumatic case there in Birmingham. And her daughter was at Birmingham Southern, and she got murdered. And Miss Sheehan committed her life to starting the Victims of Crime and Leniency. And she came to me, I was a freshman legislator, and asked me to sponsor a bill. At that time, victims of crime could not be in the courtroom. I mean, their families could not be. The criminal's family could be there crying, saying, but the victim's family. So I passed that bill for her, and they gave me an honor for getting it. Wallace was governor. And but I got pictures of me and Sessions all over my wall when he's a young attorney general. He ain't changed much.
No, he really hadn't.
I'm sorry to interrupt you about that, though. I was going to think about Sessions being a young attorney general. I was in the legislature when Sessions was attorney general. But they were gutting his budget.
They were gutting his budget, and he had some other issues, too. There was a tough time, and I think you look at what we got right now, and it's kind of the same thing. The last time that office was totally reformatted was Sessions, and that would have been in '95, and most of us didn't even have email accounts then. So it's just kind of, it's been a while. I think that we've got 21st century crime going on in this state, but we kind of have a 20th century response to it. Everywhere I go, people tell me they need more resources, they need better equipment, they just need updates on everything. And the beauty of what I just finished doing was, when we wrapped up, my last job in Washington after after we won was they made me senior counsel for DOJ. And what that job entailed was they had 16 different working groups that had studied the worst problems, border security, Second Amendment issues, pro-life issues. They had 16 different working groups that had ID'd all these problems for the Department of Justice to handle. What they didn't know was how to fix those problems, because they didn't, the people who had written the reports didn't understand what Attorney General Sessions and President Trump wanted in the way of fixing. And so they said, hey, Chess, you've been with the campaign for 2 years, and you're a lawyer, get in there and figure out what we're doing with all this. And so one of the beauties of it was you really got to get your hands dirty in fixing these problems. The second beauty of it was one of the initial things they handed me was the entire stack of all the Obama executive orders. And they said, you figure out what you want to do with this. And it was me and 2-3 other people, and we had a great time doing that. First of all, I was shocked at how bad some of those things were. You had a lot of social engineering in the military. You had a lot of threats to Second Amendment rights. You had a lot of, it was just across the board. It was literally everything. And so we started getting to work, and what happened was that I felt like we made a lot of great progress on the executive order front. I felt like that we got DOJ lined up from a policy perspective where it needed to be. But at the end of it, I just felt no calling whatsoever to stay in Washington. I mean, my life is in Birmingham, my wife's in Birmingham, my kids are in Birmingham. And the fact of the matter was, by the time I got done with D.C., I had spent 322 nights away out of 365.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I'd been gone.
Yeah, that wouldn't be any good.
And I've got 2 girls.
Not
they
the
need
age
a
of,
father.
no, that was
Yeah.
not any good.
So I made this decision to come home, and it was a very easy decision to make because it's where I felt called to go. And then once I got home, you start looking around here, and I thought, well, my goodness, I've spent 2 years getting Washington straight. And by the way, just defeating Hillary was the toughest experience of my life. I routinely worked 20 hours a day. My credit cards got shut down 17 times because I kept getting hacked.
Oh, is that right? Because
Yes.
they were doing,
Because they can find me. My name is Chess Bedsole. I'm not John Smith.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody on the dark web was trying to tap into the bank. And the bank security in Birmingham said, Chess, they don't want your money. They're not trying to get at that. They're trying to steal your data. And so my bank cards kept getting shut down. I had death threats. They finally gave me a Secret Service badge. Of course, I traveled in Pence's bubble for a while, and that kind of made all that die down. But listen, it was tough. It was hard. And I don't think most Americans realize what the state of affairs has become on a national political level. It is a really tough job to work any of those things. And if people ask me on the street now to say, well, what do you think of what the DOJ is doing or what the Trump White House is doing, I'm always very careful to say, you know what, before you critique the job these folks are doing, you need to know that they are not getting much sleep. They are absolutely having security issues. I can guarantee you that. And they are just in a different world than you and I live in on a day-to-day basis. It is not always a nice place. And so my experience, though, kind of toughened me on a lot of these things. And I grew up where politics was a nice and genial thing, and everybody got along for the most part. And that's just not the way it is anymore. And you really have to gird yourself and make yourself stronger to do these kinds of roles. But the fact of the matter is, I got back home to Alabama, and I looked around, and I only saw 2 people running for Attorney General. And frankly, they both had asked something of the former governor and taken something from the former governor, which means they both have to recuse from the public corruption cases. And to me, I just looked around and I thought, you know, I mean, I'm an old traditional Methodist, and I believe that some things are right and some things are wrong, and that's just wrong. I don't do business with criminals, and I don't think you should, especially if you're going to be in law enforcement. So, to be honest, I had friends and family say, you know what, you ought to consider this. You're clean as a whistle. I've never been audited for cause. I've never been investigated for ethics problems, and I've never recused from public corruption because I was close to public corruption. And I'm the only person in this race who can say that. I think that means something. I still live in a world where that means something, and I think it should mean something.
It should. Chess, what about, you mentioned public corruption and violent crime.
Yeah.
People don't think about that so much.
They don't.
But every time you turn the news on in Birmingham and Montgomery, that's the first thing on the news. Somebody's murdered every night here in Montgomery, just about.
That's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. And the reason why is because just about every 10 years, I know somebody who gets killed. And, you know, there was a guy.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You actually know people. The one
Yeah.
like me is kind of like street people killing each other or something.
Yeah,
like
and every
gang
now
people.
and then it's somebody you know.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, I don't want to get into names or anything, but there was a guy that worked on the Trump campaign here in Montgomery that was murdered behind one of his businesses probably about a month before Mr. Trump got the nomination. But it was right around late spring, early summer, if I recall, and it was hard. I was on the road.
How was he killed?
He was stabbed.
Oh, I remember hearing about that guy.
Yeah,
the bus guy. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want to say his name, but
right,
yeah. And you know, it's hard. And so you
just
look
to
around,
rob him, what they were after.
That's all they were doing. They were trying to rob him. And he was in his car behind his office. I mean, he was just living his day-to-day life, exactly where he should have been. He wasn't in a bad part of town. He was just at work. And you see that, and it happens just enough to bother me. And here's what happened. I started looking at violent crime. One of the things that I got to see from the DOJ position was when you see crime from 40,000 feet down, you can see patterns. And when you see the patterns for Alabama, you see two things kind of jump out at you. And one is the violent crime rate is really high, especially if you look at urban areas. But
we're not ahead of Detroit and Chicago, are we?
No,
in Birmingham.
No, Lord knows, not, and thank goodness for it. But here's what I'd like to see done. Richmond, Virginia was the #1 violent crime city in America in '98. Back in '98. It's been a while. But they did something. They dropped their violent crime rate 35% in 1 year.
How?
And here's what they did. They identified the 300 worst felons in their community.
Oh, you find out who they are. You know who they are.
Oh, yeah, you know who they are. They're repeat felons. You're looking at gang members. You're talking drug dealers. And the one thing they all have in common, though, is they're all going to be arrested with a gun. And if they're already felons, then they're in violation of federal law.
So you go after them for that.
So you go after them for that. You put them in a federal prison, and they wind up getting sent about 5 states away. And there's more truth in sentencing in a federal system. So they'll get a 10-year sentence. You know, they'll serve at least 8.5 of that. Whereas in the state system, they'll get out whenever it's full. And so, you know, I don't want to oversimplify, but that's basically it. And so what you do is you take these people and you put them in the federal system and they're gone. It's called Operation Exile. And you literally exile them from the community. And then what you've got left is, you've got the 300 worst people gone. And what you got left is you got a community where the local resources can take a breath. The police can see, okay, what can we do now? What is it that we now live under? This is an easier community for us to police. This is an easier community for us to kind of go after. And then you can take a breath. It gives your resources a break, gives your manpower a break. The other thing it does, though, is it does not drive people into the state prison system, which obviously we have an overcrowding issue. But the way to get this done is you've got to get government grants from the federal government. And that's how Richmond did it. They got a several $million-dollar grant from the feds, and they had cooperation from the U.S. Attorney's Office to move people into that system. And so you've got to have that in place. Now, what I bring to the table is General Sessions is sitting on $2 billion a year in grant money, billion with a B.
So that the Justice Department decides that?
Yes. And so obviously having come out of there, I know exactly what grants I'd like to apply for. I know exactly how we would need to go about getting those, and I know exactly how to manage it when it's over. On top of that, you know, you're going to need to have communications with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I can tell you we've already had the Northern District guy confirmed from the Senate.
Who got the U.S. Attorney?
J. Town.
Was he a friend of yours?
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's spelled with an E?
No, it's T-O-W-N.
What's his background?
Well, he's got an interesting background to be a U.S. Attorney in Alabama.
That's what I was trying to add. Wonder why you didn't want to be the U.S. Attorney in Northern.
I just didn't feel called to do it. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I've been a state court judge. I've spent far more time in state court than in federal courts. And I think when you're looking at somebody, especially to serve as a U.S. Attorney, you need to have somebody with a really heavy federal court background.
So he had one.
Which he does. And he's also a Marine.
Yeah.
And he was a JAG officer in the Marines.
Was he your friend before you this? You knew him?
I actually met him during the Trump campaign. Like I had heard of him and he'd heard of me, but we weren't friends until the Trump campaign. He's just a great guy. I can't say enough good things about him.
So at what point did you decide to run for Attorney General? When you were up in New York or Washington?
You know, some folks in Washington said, we wish you'd think about this. And I kind of did, but I kind of didn't. I really just wanted to get home. And you're working 20 hours a day just trying to get everybody set up and straight, trying to get Jeff Sessions, you know, ready to go. And so I didn't really think about it much until I got home. But once I got home, I was shocked to see that there were only 2 people running. And I was shocked to see that they both had, you know, taken something from the governor. And I just thought, well, that's just too much. So then I started talking about friends and family, praying about it. And we all kind of came to the conclusion that, you know, here's the reality. When you are one of 12 to 15 people that join a campaign that everybody says has no chance of winning, and you join it anyway, and then you win, you got to credit nothing but God for every day that you're on that. And I can tell you, no matter how chaotic that campaign got, and no matter how much stress there was, external and internal, I've never been more spiritually at peace, because I knew for a fact that I was where I was supposed to be, and I was doing the job I was supposed to be doing, and that was it. And so I never questioned it. And all these people later said, well, didn't you feel like quitting, or didn't you feel like, no, I never felt like that. I felt completely at peace doing that job. But the fact of the matter is, you can't come out of that experience and have a president in the White House now thinking that you did that yourself, because it's so much bigger than you. So, you know, so it is what it is. And I don't think for a second that I was led down that road to come home and do nothing. I mean, we're not supposed to bury our light in a bushel. It just doesn't work that way. So,
Jenna's okay with you running statewide?
she's just fine with me running statewide. She's here right now, so
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate her coming. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Sure, thank
our
you.
time goes up by fast. Our time's up, Chess. We'll have to have you back on again for the primary.
I've enjoyed it. I'd love it.
Before next June. Folks, our guest tonight has been practicing attorney Chess Bedsole, who has long roots in Alabama politics. Is from Jackson County in southwest Alabama, and grew up in Mobile, and went to law school here at Alabama, and practicing law in Birmingham. His wife Jenna's a practicing lawyer in Birmingham. 2 lovely daughters, and we need more folks like this to get in Alabama politics. We thank you for taking time to be with us tonight, and we thank you viewers for watching. Hope you tune again next week for Alabama politics. Thank you. Thank you, Chess.
Thank you.
Goes by in a hurry, doesn't it?
Appreciate it.